Hi there, I'm Beth, and today I'm going to be sewing the beautiful Solar Marine uniform for Smart Doll. The sewing pattern is shared for free on the official Smart Doll website by Danny Chu. Download and print your sewing pattern and cut out all the template pieces. I printed mine at 100% scale, though the pattern mentions it being sized 5% larger to account for shrinkage after washing. I remember Danny mentioning it being quite a tight fit, and I've seen a couple people sew this already and they agreed. In order to try to get a slightly looser fit, I'll be using a 5mm seam allowance instead of 7mm in places where I can to try to add a little width overall. I referenced the official images of the suit as I sewed and used this one to plan out the colour blocking I want to use for sewing mine. Here I've looked out the main things I'll need, the paper templates and my main fabric. This is a little unusual. It's actually blackout curtain lining. It's cotton on the right side and coated on the inside so it doesn't fray and has a nice weight to it. I used it for my fragile jacket mock-up and I liked how it came out. I've got a grey zip that opens fully at the bottom and a little orange ribbon so I can add a label where the Mirai label is on the original jacket. I have some orange cam snap fastenings which are 1 cm wide, and I'm excited to have my very own Solar Marine patch to use too. I received a wonderful embroidery sewing machine as compensation from Singer when they asked me to be in their heavy-duty sewing machine campaign. I created my own replica patch digitally and used the machine to stitch it out. It took a lot of trial and error, but I'm happy with the final results. One of my accent fabrics is this medium weight cotton, which I dyed orange myself. Finally, my other accent fabric, this grey cotton. It's very lightweight, so I plan to add iron-on interfacing to stabilise it. My next step is to trace round all my template pieces, taking care to match the grain lines shown on each piece. This part can take a while, with so many separate pieces. For the bits I need to stabilise, I trace onto the interfacing first, then cut, and iron it onto the fabric before cutting the fabric. I've got everything cut out for the trousers first, and I've transferred over the matching lines and the front and back markings too. The templates tell us what to overlock and show where to top stitch, so refer back to them as needed. I've cut little snips in the seam allowance where the matching lines are and some extra markings for the closure areas. I use heat erasable pen. Here, I've laid it all out as it'll be joined together. The waist-facing piece I've cut from white cotton to minimise any risk of staining the vinyl body. I also make sure my bobbin thread is white throughout, as it'll also be pressed against the vinyl. First, I overlock the waist-facing lower edge and the closure areas too. Next, I'll fold back the top and bottom seam allowance, of the knee patches. I'll top stitch them onto the left and right side pants pieces where marked on the template. There's also 2 rows of decorative stitching to add to each. Then I'll sew on the side pants bottom pieces. The seam allowance is overlocked, pressed upwards and top stitched. Since I'm using a non-fray fabric, I'm not overlocking all of my inner seams, but I do recommend it. I'm going to use a bit of this 1/4 inch adhesive soluble tape. It was recommended to me by both Barb and Sandy from Enchantarium and My Lady Disdain. It's double-sided, sticky, and vanishes with water. It'll be well suited to doll sewing, I think, and I do plan to wash this outfit later on. Take care to get these patches on the correct side. My assembled side pieces. I changed out the top thread to match the fabric colours. The decorative seams on the knee patches are a nice touch. Next, we'll simply attach the front and back pieces. I've got my right pieces on the right side here, and on the left are the pieces with the off-centre closure. For this seam, only sew up to the end of opening marker on the template. Only top stitch that far as well. Use the matching lines and pin the seams before sewing. Each seam gets pressed outwards and top stitched as well. This makes up our 2 trouser legs. As you see, there are some nice subtle curves in the pattern. Here you start to see the overlapping closure for the doll's back left side. Next, overlock, press and hem the trouser legs, being aware of the longer seam allowance. I have a surprise inspection from the supervisor. My top stitching missed the hem in a couple of spots, so I decided to add a second row of top stitching. It's just because my blackout fabric leaves holes behind if you unpick your stitching. Tricky. Next, I'll match the front and back crotch seams, pin and sew them. The front seam is pressed open and the back is pressed towards the closure. They're starting to look more like trousers now. Next, I'll attach my waist-facing piece. The markings should match the front, back and sides of the trousers. Since I've been sewing with an altered 5mm seam allowance for a looser fit, my waist facing needs to be extended a little. I traced it out again onto cotton and extended each side, remembering to overlock the lower edge again. I'll pin mine starting from one enclosure and make my way round, trimming off any excess. This pattern specifies a slightly inset waist facing, which I marked onto my fabric here. Right sides in, I line up the facing end, then turn it back. I also turn the edge of the closure back over it, leaving a small offset. Once sewn and turned, the lining should sit back a little from the edge. I pin my facing all the way round and repeat the same folding method for the other closure side. I'll sew the facing on, ready to turn towards the inside. It's sewn and hopefully looks right when flipped over. I trim away excess seam allowance towards the corners. I use a narrow, blunt tool to push out the corners, and I'm happy to see it looks good. I repeat for the other side. Now I'll just flip and pin the waist facing to the inside and refer to the template for the top stitch spacing. But just before that, I'll finish the top stitching for both the closure edges here. There we go. That's the waist complete, it just needs a snap fastening. All that remains now is to match up, pin and sew the inseam. Overlock the edges, and as a nice finishing touch, stitch down the seam allowance flat at the bottom hems. Also, add a little horizontal reinforcement stitching at the base of the closure too. Here they are, turned back round the right way and looking very cool. They just need the snap installed. Do pay attention to your snaps though. I've put one half of mine in the wrong way round. I had to wrestle it off with pliers and snips. I got it fixed though, and can finally test the fit. This pattern is only going to fit the classic Smart Doll body, of course, but I wonder if we'll get a larger version for Pear sometime. What do you think of the fit? I'm really happy with it. Personally, having super tight clothes on my Smarties really frustrates me when trying to pose them. I'm much happier with a little wiggle room. It all comes down to your fabric choice though. I think a medium weight stretch fabric will come out fitting just like the original. I had specific colours and fabrics in mind for mine though, to match something special that we'll reveal at the end. Okay, a few detail shots of the trousers and then on to making the jacket. Look out your jacket template pieces now, and a reminder that the pattern when printed at 100% should feel 5% larger to account for shrinkage. I'm still going to use a 5mm instead of 7mm seam allowance in a couple of places, just to make sure it's not too tight for my personal preference. I've laid out the templates, roughly how they'll be assembled. The arms pieced together like this, with an armband on the left arm, and an outline to show where the embroidered patch goes on the right arm. This is the collar piece and the back yoke, which goes over the tops of the shoulders, and below that goes the two back pieces. I've made a couple of notes on mine here. I want to leave an opening for the stand port to be accessible, which I'll mark on shortly, and I want to include a little ribbon label too on the doll's right side. These two pieces are mirrored to be the front left and rights, with this piece joining them on the right side and these two pieces going together to make the same shape for the left side. We have pieces to make the belt here. And finally, these three pieces are the facings or lining to go on the inside. As you've seen, I have all my extra bits ready too: ribbon, snaps, zip and patch. I'll trace round them all onto the corresponding fabrics, taking note of grain lines and snipping all the marking lines. Snip, snip, snip. I'll start by putting all the sleeve pieces together. I have one orange armband, and I cut the template to help position the patch correctly. I also marked L and R on all these pieces to keep them matched up together properly. I also transferred the markings for the cuffs at the bottom here. Cutting extra notches where needed to help curve the fabric, I start by joining the lower sleeves to the elbow pieces. Both the lower and upper sleeve seam allowances are pressed towards the elbow and are top stitched there. I'll join the upper sleeves to the elbows and then attach the band. Next, I fold and sew the cuffs. I'm just now realising that you're supposed to sew across the bottom tip there and turn it out, but what I did was to fold in that tip, then the two long sides. This mitered fold gives us a nice neat inside and is top stitched at 5mm from the edge. Also, my fabric is non-fray, so I'm not overlocking, but you should do that here. My sleeves are done, and my little patch is stitched into place too. I left out the CJ initials purposefully, by the way. It kinda didn't feel right to include them in my own version. Next, I'll join the back pieces. I've marked where I want to leave the seam open for the stand port. I also left a marker for the label because I 100% will forget it otherwise. Join the two back pieces at the back centre. I will top stitch my seam allowance open and reinforce the opening. Then sew on the back yoke piece. Press the seam upwards and top stitch. Here's mine done, and the stand porthole. And the inside. I'm going to clip my ribbon in place now. I don't trust myself to remember later. Next, I'll join these front pieces, match the lines up as before, and press the seam towards the front and top stitch. They're done, and next I'll sew on the front yoke pieces. The seam is pressed up and top stitched for the right side. And for the left side, both seams are pressed towards the smaller yoke piece. Here they're together. Again, I swapped out the top thread to match the grey fabric. Now we will join the back piece to the fronts, joining at the shoulders, and pressing the seam upwards to top stitch. Matching to the correct sides, I'll sew in the sleeves next. I gathered the sleeve cap a little first to help ease them in. I close in the side seams, pin and sew. Using hemostat to help, I'll pull the sleeves right side out. There we go. Now I'll sew together the belt pieces, right sides in. They join at the side seams. The template indicates to open the seam allowances outward. Once sewn, align the shorter inner curve with the lower jacket hem. Match the markings, pin and sew. Here it's folded out. We get a really nice curved hem with this jacket. Next, I'll grab the facing pieces. They'll come together like this, with the seam directions marked on the templates. As these are regular cotton fabric, I'll overlock this upper curved edge before joining with the other pieces. Here they're joined, and the front seam is top stitched towards the side. I've also overlocked the upper edges of these as shown on the template. The side seam will be overlocked directly to the jacket side seam later. I've marked where the zip should start and stop, and for those planning ahead, you ideally want a 16cm long zip. Mine is a thrifted zip, a little too bulky and a little too long, but I'll make do. I open it out and match it with the correct jacket side. Line up the bottom with our marking and hand baste it in place. Repeat the alignment and basting for the other side. Mine are basted and I measured the seam allowance, noticing my zip tape is wider than usual, so I have a little of it overlapping the jacket edge. I then grab the facing piece and line it up, right sides in, to the jacket edges. Check that the facing and jacket line up properly. Pin and sew each zip at the machine. Flip the facing round to check that everything lines up properly when zipped. If your zip's too long, you could fold it back on itself before sewing. But since mine is really chunky, I'm just going to let it run straight up into the collar. This should look fine because the collar is made to extend past both sides of the zip, enclosing the cut-off ends. If the zip lines up okay, flip the facing back out and line up the lower hem of the facing and jacket together. Pin and sew. Trim the corners and turn the belt right side out. Next, we'll top stitch all the way round the front closure edges and lower belt, before top stitching the upper edge of the belt, with the inner seam pressed down and the facing flat. As mentioned on the template here, the facing's side seam should now be overlocked together with the jacket's side seam. I pushed the sleeve in a little to make this easier. Repeat for the other seam, and then hand stitch the upper edge of the facing to the jacket's shoulder seam. They should line up nicely like this. I'm ready to sew the collar now, so I'll trim off the excess from my zip. As before, we have markings to match up, right sides in, pin and then sew the collar to the jacket. The collar extends past the zip on each side. For the second piece, I want to press upwards the lower seam before I sew it on. I'll line it up with the other collar piece, pin and sew up, along and down the outer edge. I'll trim the excess seam allowance all along before I turn it out. This will make installing a snap fastening a little easier. I turn out the corners and tuck in the seam allowance at each side neatly. With the inner seam pressed upwards, I'll now top stitch around all 4 edges of the collar. Here it's done and just leaves the snap fastening left. I'm excited to see it all together. I managed to pay attention and not screw this one up, so now my jacket's finished. What do you think of it? I really liked this pattern. It has some nice features that I've not done before. I like the neat inner facing and I'm pleased with my colour choices too. It was easy to add in the stand porthole, and the little orange tag makes it look more professional too. And of course I'm delighted that it has an embroidered patch too. It fits my beautiful grey Cyber Transcendence really nicely. Not too tight, just as I wanted. I love how both pieces look together. I want to welcome in my newest Patreon members: Jessica, Amanda Bucci, Brenda Quimby, Angela Blythe, great surname, and Kim Williams. As I mentioned in a recent video, the custom doll tier is now active, and I'm accepting commissions. Follow the link in the description to read my public posts on Patreon that explain it all. Thanks so much to all of you for all your support. You'll see in the final shots here that my new Solar Marine uniform has been created to match this awesome new Smart Doll head. My husband Craig and I have teased this project before, and this is just the first of hopefully many different helmet designs that he's created specifically for the Smart Doll body. This one is 3D printed in resin and has been painted, glossed, had decals added and been weathered. I'm so proud of him for creating this. I'll let him share more about it when he's ready. There's a whole mini-universe with lore and story developing. It's very exciting. For now, check the description box below if you'd like to print your own. I hope you've enjoyed today's sewing tutorial. please consider leaving a vote for me on the Smart Doll Creators nomination form, also linked below. And until next time, please take care. I'll see you soon. Bye.